One thing I should really touch on the 65 Sport Yacht is how much development and research has sort of gone into this boat. What we found with the Hawk 38 is that we had a little play with the lighting and some of the management systems on the boat. And often what we have is what we call a trickle-down effect. So where we develop large boats and we trickle down that technology into the smaller boats. On the Hawk was kind of reverse of that. We kind of trickled some of the technology upwards as well, where we sort of did a little, sort of playing with electronics and seeing what we can achieve. And the 65 is no exception from that. The lighting element of this boat is going to be quite striking. There's this kind of white LED strip lights, but it can be as an upgrade. You can basically do the red, green and blue and white LED strip lights, and that's basically all over the boat. So that can actually be controlled by the actual screens. Now, one thing we have done is integrated the full boat management system into the navigation displays, and basically controls elements of the wipers, the bilge pumps, the black water tank, the fuel tanks, and you can sort of control the whole boat elements, including the air conditioning, from basically the main screens themselves. Touching on performance with the engines, so the standard engines are the Volvo IPS 1200s. The estimated performance with that would be about 32 knots is what our expectations are, and then the optional upgrade is the 1350s. The 1350s were estimated between 33 to 34 knots performance. Now, I should touch on with the IPS. The IPS gives a really different element, and we're seeing a lot of boat manufacturers starting to integrate IPS propulsion systems into their designs and their brand. And when IPS was launched, it kind of revolutionized how boating was. It meant that someone new to boating within probably, I guess I safely can say, within 20 minutes of tuition could probably quite comfortably dock a boat. Particularly with like the DPS antennas. Let's say they're getting a bit nervous, they press like the DPS element of it, the station hold function, and it'll hold you on station, and you can sort of compose yourself, unpress it, or if you're doing your ropes, do your ropes, etc., etc., and give you time to come to the dock safely, or come, if you're waiting for a fuel pontoon, go to the fuel pontoon. And the 65 has that capability. It's easy to maneuver, being IPS. So if you've been out all day, you're a bit tired or a bit fatigued, or well, let's face it, turning up in this boat is going to draw crowds and a lot of people watching you. It's going to make you look like the best captain in the marina. You're going to dock it very sensibly. It's very easy to use. There's a bow thruster there if you want to use it as an element. But the performance element of this boat, when accelerating with both the 1200 and the 1350, but particularly with the 1350s because it's got the supercharger, would be quite staggering. It will pretty much jump out the water. What we tend to find is with the 1200s and the 1350s, both will perform extremely well, but particularly with the 1350s with the supercharger element, is the fact that it will be like a rocket ship. It will be put the throttles down. It's the fact that it will jump out the water and be ready to go, and it will be on the plane and off very, very quickly. And I think it'll be quite. Most people will be very staggered on how this boat will perform. Right, so let's just talk about some of the technical elements of the 65 Sport Yacht. So firstly, the boat is vacuum infused. The boat is vacuum infused on the hull, the deck, and one thing that's quite interesting is that we've even infused the bulkheads themselves. That's to create a lightness. So we've got a very light and stiff structure, which is perfect, which is ideal for IPS. For an IPS always likes lightweight elements. Particularly when we come to talking about hulls and performance. The moment you start putting weight on the boat and bogging them down, you tend to find with the Predator elements is that the IPS boats perform very well with the Predators because often they're very light, and then as soon as you go into a flybridge boat, they start slowing down and the performance starts suffering slightly. So they start becoming an equivalent of a shaft variant. You still gain the fuel advantages over an IPS compared to shaft, but you'll just find that with a flybridge boat, generally a shaft variant and an IPS variant will always be of similar performance, but when you get to a Predator, generally you tend to find the advantages because of the weight savings, or because of weight, or because a Predator generally are lighter than a flybridge, is that you gain the fuel benefits, but also you gain the performance. The actual carbon fibre is the actual sky helm itself. So there's actually in the structure, there's the carbon fibre elements into the actual composite of the whole boat. Well, particularly around the deck area. So when you go onto the build, you'll see on the actual superstructure, there's carbon fibre elements to it to try and help save weight. So it has been a factor that we've considered. The other factor we've really considered is noise. And clients, I see it time and time again, often want to discuss about silence and noise elements on the boat. Being IPS underway, I mean, we could have this conversation as I am now. I'm probably talking about, what, 55, 60 decibels max. We could have this conversation now inside the boat, probably the doors open, to be fair, at full speed, and have a sensible conversation. And because the exhaust is underwater, you won't have that sort of drone that you would expect from most boats, which is quite a nice, which is always a nice to have, and there's a nice benefit of IPS. But also is the fact that in the engine room, when you go down in the engine room, in front of the engine there's a bulkhead, and there's an air gap. And in between that air gap we've basically got the gyro, which I'll touch on in just a sec, and then you've got the fuel tanks, and then we've basically got 2-inch or sound-inch foam, and then we've got what we call a rock wall bulkhead that separates the engine room bulkhead to the master cabin, and that will gain great benefits in terms of trying to reduce noise. And these are things that we would normally do on a large yacht, particularly on the larger ones like the 116 Plus is normally what you would expect it from, but we've tried to trickle down that idea. We first launched that on the 66 Manhattan, where there was a separation between the master cabin bulkhead and the guest cabins, and the 68 retained that, the 68 Manhattan retained that, but we've also brought it into the 65 as well to help reduce noise, just so it makes that just that little bit more comfort when it's sleeping at night or just when using the boat in the day. Stabilization is often a hot topic, particularly these days. We don't see many boats going out without stabilization. We tend to, on the Predators, it tends to be, I'm going to guess about 70% of clients would go for stabilization of some description on the Predators. When you get into more of the flybridge elements, 65 aside, I'm going to treat the 65 Skyhelm as a Predator because that's kind of what it is. But going on to the flybridge elements, we normally see the stabilization factor tends to be more up towards the 90–95% uptake. The 65 has been paired with a gyro, and the reason for that is purely because firstly the boat is IPS, so you're not getting interruption or the risk of interruption of water across the IPS drive, so you're not getting a disruption of turbulence going across the propellers. But also the fact that most clients consider being an anchor where they want the most comfort, and a gyro will offer that. The Seakeeper that we offer on this boat is a Seakeeper 18. It's very well paired with the boat. Well, I think you'll be quite surprised on how well these things perform. When at anchor, literally is, let's say a boat goes past you, you'll literally get 1, 2 on the wave, stop, and it'll hold it dead. The gyro described in some of the videos that you'll watch is really, really effective. It works very well. The boat also has interceptors as well, and the interceptors on the back end are the Volvo interceptors, which work very well with the IPS, and it will help with getting up on the plane because it will be auto trim, so it will drop an interceptor down, get it on the plane very quickly. It's something we're trying to do is redefine the sport yacht.